What's happening, everyone? Welcome to In the Studio with Spicy G. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel. Today's video will be a session video where you're going to be watching me collaborate with a killer singer-songwriter artist from Delaware, Mr. Jordan Vincent. He is one of my all-time favorite lyric writers, and I'm really excited that you're going to get to see us work together. Just a quick note about this series. This series is about the collaborative process between me and the artists or songwriters that I'm working with. It's not necessarily about, can we finish a song by the end of this particular video? Sometimes we will get the songs done. Sometimes we may just get a great chorus or a great verse pre-chorus. But the most important part is that you see how the collaboration works and you can get a lot out of it. As always, if you like the vid, please feel free to subscribe. And if you have comments and questions, you can hit me down below. You all ready? Let's do it.
Spicy G.
So one of the first things I like to do a lot of times is just grab a sample from either Apple Loops or one of my hundreds of thousands of samples that I have, and I just drag it in and see if I feel a vibe or kind of something's interesting to either one of us. So in this particular thing, you could see that I brought in this little beat. It's kind of frantic, actually, a little bit. And then I wanted to lower the tempo because it just felt a little too frantic. So then we dropped it down to about 100. And right now these things that you see here that are marked as toppers, those are like, for those musicians out there, they're like hi-hats, snaps. Sometimes they'll include a snare. Very rarely will they include like the kick drum though. That's why they call them toppers. So right here you can see that it looks like I grabbed something from a Dwilly sample pack. He is a really cool up-and-coming EDM producer, and he just released a couple of sample packs a few months back, so I wanted to try some of those. And I do this often. You can see right here, I'll find a kick pattern, and this was a sample pack that I had too, I don't remember what it was, where you can hear the beat first, and then you can actually, it's broken down so that there's snare, kick drum, hi-hats. So I just took the kick drum from that. I felt like it was a pretty good fit. I'm also always saving, so you just saw there I just saved. Super important, all you young producers. Here I just grabbed Omnisphere, which is my favorite synth plugin, and I just came up with this kind of cool little melody. Many times these, I'll start off with a sample and then find something that I like that's cool, and then delete the original sample that I had. I have to be kind of willing to part with anything. That's one of the things I've always learned. Okay, over in this instance, again, I brought in another Dwilly sample, and what I'm doing right now is I'm time stretching it. All you need to do is hold Option and drag, and it will actually time stretch the sample for you. Because remember, just because it's in the Apple Loops, it's technically not in the Apple Loops menu. That is in the Finder window, so it's not going to match the tempo and anything else. You have to kind of do that yourself. Over here, I'm just pulling out a kick drum or a snare that I think would be really cool with this. And I don't want to use, 99.9% of the time, when I pull in a sample, I don't use the full sample, right? I'm always chopping something out. Maybe I just want the snare drum, maybe I just want the kick drum. So in this case, I'm just trying to pull out a specific rhythm to lay down on the 2-bar loop here. And then I'm just going to copy it over. So most of the time I'm EQing relatively on the fly. So you can see right there, I know I did it really quickly, but what I did was I put a channel EQ in there and I cut out most of the low end. And you can see I'm adjusting right now low end even on the bass and the kick drum. Well, at least, sorry, in this case the kick drum. I'm doing that quite often because if there's too much low end in all of your pieces, you start to muddy up the bottom and you can't really get things to punch and pull through the mix.
What about starting with a bass?
What's that?
What about starting with a bass? Or whatever.
So this is a cool idea by Jordan to start with the bass, which I actually don't usually put the bass in for a while. I'm usually one, I gravitate towards either keyboards or guitar or playing chords if I hear something on it. In this particular case, it was kind of cool to start with the bass. Oh, you can see right here, I'm EQing the bass. It looks like this is the bass or the kick drum. It was the bass because it was too woofy sounding. So I had to even take out even more. I know a lot of people think, you know, especially beginning producers, like, oh, you know, why are you EQing the low end of the bass? It's the bass. Yes, but you still need things to pop, and it can't be woofy sounding. You'll also notice Jordan kind of pacing back and forth. A lot of times the top liners or songwriters will kind of get in a vibe and a zone until they have something they can present. You can see I saw, I think this was an Apple loop, yeah, and I just like this one little part on the loop, so I cut it completely out and just used it, and right now I'm just moving it down. I always like to have, typically I have my kick drum at the top, and then my snare drum, and then any of my hi-hat or topper things, and then percussion. And right now I'm just playing with the idea of, do I need the entire percussion kind of effect there? Because it's very, you know, you can see Jordan just mentioned here, he said, oh, we don't need the metronome. I think he was referring to that percussion-y sound. Because sometimes if you have too much material, it ends up clogging up, you know, the song, and there's no space for the lyrics and the melody. But I was thinking of, you know, putting these things back in. The only thing I added was this little guitar thing I just grabbed from, again, the Dwilly sample pack. Shout out, Dwilly. I just grabbed one of your slap guitar kind of sounds, and I put it down a half step. Yeah, I neglected to say that we were on a break, so sorry about that. I love finding cool samples, and even though this is a simple slap guitar sound, I think it's really well done, cleanly produced. And over here, it looks like now I'm going to add some compression to shrink the dynamic range down just a bit. I do a lot of compression, like the EQ, on the fly.
The beat's going to stay under it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you don't like my beat.
I love the beat.
Remember, those compressors help to really shrink that dynamic range down so you can slot in your sounds in the correct part of the frequency spectrum. So that guitar sound is going to become the pre, it seems like, so I'm going to go ahead right now and slide everything over and see how the beat lines up with the guitar pattern and make sure it still grooves and has a vibe to it. Over here, I love using this plugin. This is one of my favorite plugins, the Sound Toys Decapitator. I almost always put this on the bass. Right now I'm just looking for a good sound on the bass. Sometimes it takes a while to get a good sound happening on the bass for me. But this Decapitator does a real good job. This is, again, one of my favorite Sound Toys plugins. You can see I'm messing around with some of the settings. Just the punish button is kind of like a huge overdrive. Besides just the drive knob, I mean, it kind of like really distorts the sound a lot. So what I'm looking for over here now is transition material from the verse into the pre-chorus. And a lot of times you'll use what's called uplifters or risers. And so I just found one, I think it was from a Vengeance pack that I used. They have a lot of really good lifters and risers, and I just kind of cut just a small portion. I didn't need a huge one because I'm only going into the pre-chorus, so I just grabbed one real quick and just cut the beginning off and made it a riser. Now I decided that I wanted a different sound for the bass. So what I'm doing now is I just created another bass track. I just made a duplicate bass track, and I labeled it bass pre. I pretty much want the same sound, but I'm gonna make this one pulse, I believe. For all you EDM people out there, this is a super important tool, which is the LFO tool by Xfer. I think this is the one that most people use. It's super simple to use, and everyone I know in the EDM world uses that one. The reason I wanted to pulse the bass in this particular section is to give us a little bit more movement, right? I always use some sort of pulsing a lot of times just to kind of create that motion moving forward, like we're moving closer to something. So that's why I ended up choosing to pulse the bass in this particular instance. So you can see now I took out that metronomic type percussion sound because it was kind of getting in the way a little bit. In this particular instance, I'm going into one of the samples that I made, which is I took a piano sound and I reversed it, and I use this a lot. Again, this is transition material, so it's a reverse piano sound that just kind of gives you a little lift to move into the next section of the song. And obviously I have to change the transposition or the key of the piano. I don't even remember what key it's in, but you could just go up to that top window and just use the transpose button. Super easy. Right, just gives a little bit of lift moving into that pre, along with the other riser that we had in there as well. This is a synth I like to use quite often. This is, again, another big EDM synth, which is massive, and I have a bunch of different settings for it, so I just selected one of the settings that I use quite often. So right here I'm just adjusting the buses, which on bus 1 I had a reverb and bus 2 I had a delay, and I took the delay off of this particular synth completely. And what I'm going to do now is I'm using one of my other favorite plugins from Soundtoys, which is the Echo Boy. That's probably their most noted. And I'm just going to put a bigger reverb on it. I use this Cave Echo quite a lot. It's just a bigger sound than the bust reverb that I have coming over, which is from the Space Designer plugin in Logic. And now I'm just going to add, of course, some claps, because who doesn't love a clap, right? I can't remember what pack this is from. So I'm just looking to add a little bit of a different color kind of here at the pre, a little bit more of a live kind of sound with the claps. This has a little bit more of an alternative vibe to it, so I want to make sure that I'm kind of keeping that sound, and I feel like the claps will give us a little bit more live kind of alt feel, at least the way that I have it set up right now. And you can see I'm adjusting the way the claps are. I felt it was kind of reversed from where it probably should be, so I'm just kind of making that adjustment. And the reason I extended that a little bit is because I definitely wanted to get the natural reverb that was in the sample. You'll notice that I use samples quite a lot. Mostly it's because they are already mixed and mastered sounds. So it makes things much quicker to get great sound almost immediately. This is super important. I know this is, you may be thinking like, why am I highlighting this? Because it's really important that you keep track of who wrote what in your project and who produced what. Because sometimes there could be, 16 writers and 5 producers. I mean, take a look at one of Kesha's songs, that song Timber. I think it was like 12 or 16 writers and 4 or 5 producers. I mean, you want to make sure that you're keeping track of everything. This is kind of a cool trick that I use a lot, which is I just use that delay. See right where the arrow is right there. I like to use that a lot. I'll highlight a section and then I'll delay it just by a certain amount of ticks. It helps to kind of make it groove a little bit more rather than being so rigid on the grid. So I kind of just move some things around just slightly so it has a little bit more of a live, groovier type feel. All right, that big move right there is me preparing to do the chorus, right? Typically, a lot of times, your verse is going to have very similar chords, if not the same chords as your chorus, or your chorus is going to have the same as your verse. And what I'm going to try to do now is make the chorus a little bit bigger in this particular case. This is one of my favorite synths, maybe my top go-to synth, which is Omnisphere. It's by Spectrasonic. It's just a great synth plugin. It just has everything, and I use it on almost every project. Sometimes I'll use 1 or 2 versions, examples of it. Sometimes I'll put in 10 to 20. I mean, it just depends. It is a pretty big program, so watch how much you use it, but it's one of the best. So right here, I'm thickening up the sound over here at the chorus, and you can see I'm also going to be pulsing now the synth as well, right? Which is going to help give me, again, more drive at that chorus. This is a cymbal crash. This is kind of a stock Logic cymbal crash. And then I just dragged in a downlifter, which was obviously the opposite of the uplifter. Especially when the chorus hits, I want a cymbal crash, and I want something that's going to kind of almost ring out a little bit. It kind of just helps you feel like you've arrived somewhere. In order to get the impact that I want, I need to probably have some sort of a drop right here. So what I'm doing is muting 2 beats before the chorus starts so that the drop will have more impact, right? When there's silence, it makes the chorus feel much bigger on the downbeat. Here's one of my other loops that I like to use a lot. I can't even remember how I made this or where. I took a bunch of different, I think, stomp loops. I took them and I reversed it so that you get this big kind of lifting sound into the chorus. I use it quite often, and that's why obviously I saved it under my name. It's super easy to save a loop. Just grab a 2 or 4 bar segment or whatever, and just drag it into Apple Loops, and you can throw a loop in there. It makes things so much easier when you're sampling sounds. Over here, I'm gonna now have a third bass, which is another version of the same bass. So all 3 basses in essence are the same sound, but they're gonna have a different vibe or feel to them. This one's kind of got that longer feel rather than the pulsing feel, because I wanted the big, deeper sound, especially when we arrived to the chorus. So that synthy sound is pulsing, so I'm gonna add in the same pulsing sound that I have on the synths on the bass. You can see I just turned the LFO tool on. I literally just dragged it over with option dragging to copy the same waveform. Alright, we're back after a
Everything eerie.
break, and you had some nuts.
I finally got some nuts, and I love them.
I know you do, man. Alright, and now we're getting set up for tracking. We're getting ready to record. What are we doing? A verse and a pre, maybe?
Oh yeah. I'll just put down what I got. And
Okay, I'll give you one bar and then you're in. Okay.
Okay. We're running out of stuff to lose. To drive up on my Holland every Tuesday, and now with different time to do. Oh yeah. Let me get it again. I can't really hear my.
So you could see here, he's really hearing. At least what got him motivated was the guitar, those two guitar chords.
We used to drive up on my Holland every Tuesday, and just what a crazy view. Another different night we sitting every Tuesday. It's just them California blues. And there's nobody else, and there's nobody else that feels like you. The California blues. And there's nobody else, and there's nobody else that feels like you. That's the basis of what I got. So it's pretty weird, but like, I'm just trying to I like the idea. There's people are get sad here too, and like nobody ever talks about it. Everybody pretends they're happy all the time. So like that's what I'm trying to.
What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna definitely put some auto tune on. I do it all the time. Doesn't matter. I mean, Jordan is a great singer, but I always put auto tune on, especially if we're doing some sort of a popish type tune.
Drive to Mulholland.
Right, it just kind of gives it that poppier. It adds almost like a little bit of a digital sound to the lead vocal, which is kind of important, at least for pop music, just in general. And you could see here, I just shifted the melody over. He recorded it over the pre-chorus, but I moved it over to the verse because I thought it could sound really cool with that minimal orchestration that I have in there right now.
Yeah, that's cool though. Tuesday, it's just in California blue. That's actually the Nate Dogg.
And I'm just taking what he did at the pre and moving it to the chorus, right? Because that feels like the chorus, California Blues, obviously.
And there's nobody else, and nobody else that feels like you. California blues. And there's nobody else, and there's nobody else that feels like you. Yeah, I mean, we're running out of stuff to lose.
Just messing with the vocal a little bit. I just turned down some of the bust-in reverb. I'm putting the auto-tune back on, but I'm making the retune speed a little bit slower and the flex time pitch a little higher, so it's not going to be as hard of an auto-tune sound. Right? It's just going to kind of grab some of the notes that I need to grab. And now, the reason I do this quite often, where I mute things kind of on and off as it's happening to see what it sounds like with certain parts of that sound in there. And I'm, in essence, kind of auditioning what it will sound like if I cut out certain parts of the bass line to make room for the vocal. I'm trying not to get in the way of the vocal.
We're running out of stuff to lose.
And by doing this also, to me, taking those three notes out, it helped to enhance, number one, the vocal, but number two, that line in the bass that goes up. That one.
And just what a crazy view. Another different night we sitting every Tuesday. We're running out of stuff to lose.
Once again, EQing. So this time, I'm putting an effect on the vocal itself. Rather than have his full vocal, I wanted a thinner sound in the vocal on this particular portion. So I took out a lot of his lower and even lower mid is just all gone. So now what I did is, this is usually how I do my sessions. We track on the live track, and then I move it down to the kind of the stationary track, which is, you can see it says lead, and then the -C is for the center. And I already have in my template, I already have this vocal chain that I use almost all the time. So you can see here I'm putting verse down, and then I'll put chorus. This is to keep track, because I want a different vocal sound on the chorus. It'll probably be a bigger sound than the verse. Almost definitely, right? Because I have that super thin sound right now in the verse.
I mean, I don't know the change. I mean, the chorus is definitely a change, but I don't know what it is yet. Just some verse stuff, real quick. We're running out of things to lose. We used to drive up to Mulholland every Tuesday on all the red and purple hues. Now we're fighting through the weekend until Tuesday. Just them California blues. Nobody else and nobody else here feels like you. California blues. Nobody else and there's nobody else here feels like you. It's just in California blues.
So I moved his voice down to the center, the chorus version, and now what I'm hearing in my head is some sort of effect on the vocal at the chorus. So I copied just that little portion of it, flattened it out, because in order to do any effects on it, you can't be a playlist. And what I'm doing now is I'm gonna jack the retune speed up, so it's gonna hit it really hard on the auto tune. And I turned what's called the formant up a lot, and it will give you this kind of muffly type sound like that. And I'm gonna enhance that muffly sound by removing some of the highs of it. Again, you can see I took the lows out. I'm always taking lows out of almost everything, you know. Just because, again, in order to make kick drums pop and basses pop, you can't really have too many things down that low end. You can see in this particular EQ, I only really want a very small portion of the EQ spectrum happening on this effect. And that little dip there, the reason I did that is to let the lead vocal come through, right? Because the lead vocal, at least in Jordan's vocal, probably comes at around 500 to 1K, 500 hertz to 1K. So I want to make sure that I make that dip happen so that it doesn't get in the way. Just cut the frequency down just a little bit. Right, all these frequency moves and EQing is super important to any recording that you're doing. It's the only way you can make things sound sound clear and clean and not muffled. You want to start on 4?
On the chorus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Over in this particular area, we decided to change the way the chord structure works. So rather than starting on the minor, we're starting on the major now, which is a little bit more of an uplift than starting at the minor at the chorus. But I think either way would work fine. But I think it seemed like Jordan really wanted that majory sound at the top.
Right. Yeah.
Just them California blues. Nobody else and nobody else here feels like you. Them California blues. Nobody else and nobody else here feels like you. We're running out of things to lose. We used to drive up to Mulholland every Tuesday and fade into the purple hues. Now we're leaving every weekend until Tuesday.
I definitely like those lyrics a ton. He's such a colorful writer. It's definitely important also that you take at least 3 takes of each section of the song. So at least 3 takes of the verse, pre and chorus. I do at least 5 at the chorus for doubling purposes. It looks like that we're probably starting to wrap up the session because it's pretty late at night now, and we're probably only going to get the verse and the chorus, but you know, we had originally started a track
I think my first take was
and
better.
we couldn't get really anywhere with it. After about 40-45 minutes, it really wasn't going anywhere, so we both agreed to just scrap it and start again. That happens quite a lot, and that's pretty normal if you want to get a tune of substance. I work with writers all the time where we just do a song and then, you know, especially if it's a new writer, we just write the song no matter what, but that doesn't tend to yield the best results. Yeah, those chorus doubles really widen the sound of the chorus and make it much bigger sounding. And it looks like that's all the time we have for this evening. Thanks so much everyone for watching. If you'd like to leave a comment, feel free to do so below. Or if you'd like an MP3 without the narration of what we've done tonight, the link is in the box.